Morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Mary Harbsheets, and I am the chairperson of the Board of Psychology Licensure Committee, and I'm happy to welcome you here today. Happy New Year to everyone, and I hope for all of us that 2022 is a very good year. A few logistical items as we get started. Please turn your cell phones and any other devices to silent, and also please mute your phone unless you're speaking. We have allocated time for public comment for items not on the agenda at the beginning of our meeting. And additionally, we welcome public comments on any item on the agenda, and it's our intent to ask for public comments prior to taking action on any agenda item. Please be respectful of our time constraints and the need to conduct and complete the committee's business. If there are several members of the public seeking to comment on a particular agenda item, I will set a time limit on each speaker to ensure maximum participation by all in the context of a busy agenda. We believe public comments are instrumental to our hearings and add to the vibrant discussion on matters before the committee. If you're making a public comment, please do not identify any licensee or registrant of the board by name in order to avoid prejudicing future action that may be required of board members in our capacity as a deliberative body in enforcement proceedings. We will meet in open session as noted on the agenda and then move into closed session to discuss and consider qualifications for licensure. We will not be discussing any items in open session after the closed session of business concludes, except to adjourn the meeting. With those logistical items taken care of, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that staff please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Harbsheets. This is Evan at the board calling roll, so we'll start with Harbsheets.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Tate. Is Dr. Tate in attendance?
Tate is not here today.
Okay. We have quorum.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with any public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Moderator, could you please open the public comment box?
We have opened for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and send the word comment to all participants. We will call on people in the order comments are received. We are taking comments for comments not on the agenda. Let us take just a quick moment to see if we have any requests for public comment. We have a request for public comment. Hold on. I'm Dr. Dominic Eugene. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. We see that you have unmuted your microphone. Can we do a mic check, please?
Mic check.
We hear you. Go ahead, please.
I was just curious if there's already on the agenda a conversation about changes with testing, if there'll be orals returning or any other changes to come.
Can you tell us, Dr. Eugene, a little bit more specifically about what you are looking for us to discuss about testing?
I was just curious to see if there's going to be any changes to the implementation of how tests will take place. Part 2, you know, there's been other states that have changed the testing requirements. So just wondering if we're doing that conversation here as well.
Yes, you're thinking about the EPPP Part 2. And
Yes, that's the
yes,
one.
that, if I'm correct, and Ms. Sorek, if you could add to this, that will be on the agenda for the board meeting in February. Is that correct, Ms. Sorek?
Actually, that was discussed at the last board meeting as part of the EPPP ad hoc committee report. And at this time, there is no future movement on that issue. The committee will reconvene once the ASPBB Board of Directors has met and discussed whether the part 2 will be mandatory. And then after that time, the EPPP ad hoc committee will meet and discuss, and then the board will ultimately discuss after that has happened. So no movement for the February meeting at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Sorek. Does that answer your question?
This is the moderator. She has muted herself. Give us just a moment. We have sent a request to Dr. Dominique. Oh, we see you're unmuted.
Sorry
Go ahead.
about that. I didn't realize it was on mute. Yes, that does answer the question. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. Any other public comment?
No additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the feature?
Yes, please, Mr. Moderator. Okay, our next agenda item is the approval of the Licensure Committee meeting minutes from the July 16th, 2021 meeting. Are there any comments regarding those minutes? I hear none from the committee. Are there any public comments regarding those minutes?
We have reopened for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all participants. We will take comments in the order received.
And this is Evan at the board. In the meantime, I myself did discover that I missed a period on line 265, so I will be adding that in.
Thank you.
Seeing no requests for additional comment, would you like to close the feature?
Please do. Okay. I think I can move that we accept the Licensure Committee meeting minutes from July 16th, 2021.
I can second that.
Thank you. Could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Harpsheets,
Aye.
Nystrom,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on now to the licensure staffing reports, starting with the licensing report.
Good morning, committee members. This is Stephanie, licensing manager, making the report for licensing report. Attached in the meeting materials, we have provided the statistics for license registration data by fiscal year. At the most recent report, the year, we see a slight increase in both the categories for psychologist license and psychological associate registrations. So I just want to highlight that. Following in the report, you will find our application workload reports, which provide statistics from June 2021 to November 2021. We have seen some increases in our workload, but compared to the last report made at the board meeting, we have tackled more open applications as the best we can. And then on the Psychological Associate Registration Application Report, we see some slight increases, and we see some increase in August and September on open applications because we are thinking that because a large majority of recently graduated students that they would want to apply and get their hours in. So we see the surge, which we have observed a similar trend in the past year as well. And then we have examination statistics provided for your reference. And we see that there's a lower pass rate for first-timer in the latest month. We're not sure why, because we don't ask that questions or collect that data, but I just want to point out that trend in case you notice that as well. Following that is the average application processing timeframes for the past 6 months. We have seen an increasing trend for the processing times due to increasing volume and the current resource at hand. But we're working at our best to review and process applications at the timeliest manner possible.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Could you say just a moment, kind of update us again on this situation with the registered psychologist category? I thought it was interesting that we had 2 applications, it looks like in November, and yet that category was going to be eliminated as of January 1. So if you could kind of update us on that situation.
Yes. So regarding the registered psychologist registration category, it's been eliminated by SB 801. So you see those applications open, and then we have contacted the registrants directly. Actually, we have contacted them as early as August last year, as soon as we find out about the change. And in October as well, we contacted them through as well directly, and also we posted messages and through our listserv and on our website about this change. So to remind them to look for alternate pathways if they want to continue to accrue experience towards licensure. So for example, they could apply for a psychological associate registration because on December 31st, 2021, all the registered psychologist registrations are canceled, and they cannot practice on an expired registration, which would be considered unlicensed practice if they do so.
Thank you for that update, Ms. Chung. Okay.
Absolutely.
Are there
Dr. Hodgson,
yes.
may I ask one more information? I would like to make a verbal report about this as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. On December 13, 2020, we have the pleasure having Dr. Maricela Cervantes gave a presentation to our licensing staff about her research and insight about the journey of new psychologists. It provides some insightful information that enriches and reinforces staff's understanding as we help them navigating through the licensure process. I just want to make a note that we appreciate Dr. Cervantes and taking the time to share her findings with us. Thank you, Dr. Cervantes.
Thank you. And Dr. Cervantes is a public member of the Board of Psychology. So this was very helpful. Okay. Are there any committee member questions about the licensure report?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could we, Mr. Moderator, please open the box for public comment?
We are now taking public comment on item number 5. If you would like to make a comment, please type comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and send that comment to all participants. Let us take just a moment to see if we receive any requests for public comment. Seeing no requests for public comment, would you like to close the option?
Yes, please, Mr. Moderator. Okay, we will move on to the Continuing Education and Renewals Report. Ms. McCochran, could you please share with us that report?
Hi, good morning. For the Continuing Education and Renewals Report, I just wanted to highlight a couple of items. Audits for February 2021 through June 2021 concluded this past December with a pass rate of 72%. 23% of those renewals are considered deficient just because they fall under the waiver, which provides them until January 26, 2022 to fulfill the CE requirement. And then audits for July 2021 through December 2021 were sent out yesterday. And this concludes my CE and renewals report. I am available to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any committee member questions?
No questions here. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we please open the box for public comment?
We are taking comment on item number 5B. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will take comments in the order that they are received, and we have a request for comment from Dr. Marilyn Emus, I believe is how the name is said. Bear with us just one moment. Dr. Marilyn, I have sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I'm Marilyn Immos from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I had a question regarding CPD. By the way, I was at the last meeting and I understand that this is a work in progress, that there still need to be some approvals of this before it's implemented. Can you tell me when CPD would be implemented? That's the first question. And second, let's say it would be implemented in March or April of this year, since we're still waiting on these approvals. Would it then be retroactive to January 1st, or would it be going forward?
Thank you, Dr. Emus. We will be discussing the status of CPD in our next agenda item, and we can answer those questions at that point, at that time. And if you have further questions, please feel free to ask us then.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Any other public comment?
Seeing no additional requests for public comment, would you like to close the option?
Yes, please. Okay, we will move on to item number 6A, and Ms. Costa, will you please walk us through that item?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Hopsheets.
Yes.
May I request to go back to item 5A? We would like to seek the committee's direction about the report regarding registered psychologists.
Yes.
Would we be able to? Okay, thank you. So because due to SB 801, the registered psychologist category has been removed. So we just want to seek the direction from the committee if you would like us to remove statistics reporting on the report regarding that category for the February board meeting.
I can speak, and then Ms. Nystrom, if you could please add your perspective. It feels fine to eliminate it. However, I think it would be important for us to understand what might be happening with those 89 registrants. One of my concerns is that is there unlicensed practice perhaps going on? How about you, Ms. Nystrom? What are your thoughts?
Well, one of my questions is the same as yours. What happens with the current folks? And then second, would it make sense to keep it on and just phase it out as the registered psychologists shift over?
So in other words, currently we have 89, and are you saying then we could watch that number go down over the next few months or during the year? Or in a sense, I guess, as I say that, I think, well, actually, there are 0 of them now, technically. As of January 1st, there really are 0. Is that correct, Ms. Chung?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, if there's currently 0 as of January 1, then I guess that makes sense not to track that anymore. But then, just for my own knowledge, what happened with those 89? Were they switched over to associates? Is that correct?
Oh, Ms. Chung, could you update us then on the efforts that you all have made to contact those people and what you see happening?
Absolutely. Since we have initiated contact to let them know directly that the elimination of the category, we've encouraged them to look for other pathways available if they continue to accrue hours for licensure. So it's one of the suggestions that we have provided them if they're not on the pathways that is exempted from registration with the board is to apply for the psychological associate registration. So then they will be able to continue to accrue the hours necessary towards licensure.
And have you had many people make those applications?
We have seen application coming in, but I don't have the number in hand. And I have received some inquiries from the registered psychologist just seeking for direction about next steps for clarification.
Okay. Ms. Nystrom, any other questions about that?
No. I don't think I have any other questions. I guess more than anything, I'm just hoping that it's a seamless process for those folks, and that they're seeking, other pathways, and that process is going smoothly.
Yes, yes. Now, so it sounds like the two of us are in agreement that since there are actually 0 now, it would be acceptable to drop that from the report. Am I correct, Ms. Nystrom?
Yeah, absolutely. So do we need to make a motion on that?
That's what I was going to ask too, yes. Ms. Sork, do we need a motion?
I was actually just going to ask about just a clarifying question, and I lost my train of thought. So let's see, where was I going with that? I don't think you need a motion because you're just directing the staff information to look different, but I will defer to Ms. Bond
fine.
for
Yeah,
her
that's
legal guidance on that.
Yeah, that's fine. It sounds like straight from your EO, you have enough clarity on the committee's action there, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. But I wonder, Ms. Chung, if you could be prepared at the board meeting to give us some numbers on how many of those initial 89 registered psychologists have transitioned to a different status.
Sure. I will track them for their application for psychological associate registration because other categories we don't have knowledge of until they apply for licensure. Then we can know where they accrue the hours because the other pathways don't require registering with the board.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
do we need to open again for public comment? Ms.
No.
No?
Yeah.
Ms.
I mean,
Sorek
the
has her
delay.
hand up.
Oh, okay. Ms. Sorek?
Okay, I have remembered my comment. I was just going to add that the registered psychologist registration was a limited 30-month registration to begin with. So some people were getting towards the end of their registration that were in that group of 89. So I just wanted to add that piece to add a little more context to the discussion on that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sars.
Okay, we will return to 6A. Ms. Costa? I see she's muted.
This is the moderator. Susie Costa, we have sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
This is Jason. I'm happy to provide the report if Ms. Costa is not able to, if she's not able to.
Okay. Well, let's start then, and if she is able to at some point, we can switch over. Thank you, Jason.
My pleasure. So included in your meeting materials, good morning, everyone. Included in your meeting materials is the regulations update, which shows the current status of all the board's regulatory packages. If you'd like, Dr. Harpsheets, I'm happy to address the questions by Dr. Emus.
Absolutely, please do.
Thank you. The continuing professional development regulatory package is in the hands of the Office of Administrative Law at this time. I've been in frequent communication with them, and I know that they are preparing a review, their first review mid-January, so I should be hearing within the next week or so, I'm hoping. And unfortunately, until I have their feedback, so I and all staff here at the board and legal and the Office of Administrative Law themselves are not sure what changes we're able to make to the language or how the implementation is going to work regarding the actual effective time period. I believe, and Ms. Hoganson, feel free to chime in and let me know if I'm off base, but the dates are not able to be retroactive, so they will have to be moved. The question is, what is our ability and how far do we have to be able to, or how far out can we move them after once they do their review? So that's the conversation I'm waiting to have with the reviewing attorney.
So would you say that any licensee who is in the process of collecting continuing education should continue to as before at this point in time, and recognize that there will be a year, the first year of renewal, that those people will have the option of doing continuing professional development or continuing education as it has been defined?
It was the intent of the board to allow individuals that renew after the implementation of the continuing professional development regulatory package. So after the approval of that package, it was to allow them 1 year to choose either or. So anyone that renews during that kind of 12-month period. So I am confident in saying that there is going to be an option for those licensees, but exactly how it's going to read in the regulations at this time, I'm not 100% sure, and I would be overstepping by really giving any guidance about how the law will read. but I can speak to the intent of the board, and I know that we will do everything on our end to make sure it is kind of as open a process as possible, and give them as much flexibility as we can.
Thank you. Ms. Nystrom, do you have anything you would like to ask about that or any of the other items in 6A?
No, thank you.
Could we please open the box for public comment?
We are now taking public comment on item 6A. If you would like to make a comment, please type comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will be taking comments in the order that they are received. And we have a request for public comment from Dr. Marilyn Emus. Hold on just a moment and we will send you a request to unmute your microphone. All right, you are unmuted.
Yes, thank you. This question, I think, was asked at a previous meeting, and I'm not sure if we got a definitive answer on it, so I'm going to ask it again. Let me take a scenario that might make it a little bit easier. So, for example, my license expires in July of 2022 of this year. Let's say we have somebody whose license expires next year, 2023. Do they also have a 12-month grace period as I do? Or following the implementation of the CPD, or not? The people whose license expires next year.
Mr.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. Mr. Glassbeagle, would you like to respond to that question?
Happy to. I believe the grace period window is going to come down to what the regulations end up reading at the very end. And so we don't know, I don't know if the regulation package, the way the regulations read, there is a date to date period. And I don't know where we're going to be allowed to move that window to. So I'm not able to give any more specifics around anyone's expiration date and where they're going to be able to be, you know,
I would
because we just don't know.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
I get questions obviously from licensees in our organization, and I'll just let them know that we have to wait till the language comes out in the regulations before we can give them any further information. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should be hopefully speaking with the regulatory attorney in a week or two. And as soon as I know what we can do, we will start implementing and getting this as clear for everyone as possible.
Good. Thank you so much.
And
No problem.
I think one thing that is important for us to remember is that the under CPD, we are still able to accrue 27 credits of continuing education. And so I don't think that, recognizing that we're still a bit up in the air, I hope it won't hold people up in accruing those credits and waiting until like the last year or something like that. So I just wanted to remind us that there are 27 credits we can still accrue during this period of time when we're waiting.
That's a really good point, and that reminds me of another question, if I may ask for your patience on this. I also received a question, do these 27 hours now that would be part of the CPD, do they include only interactive live activities, or do they extend to non-interactive, for example, online without an interactive function?
Mr. Glassbeagle, could you, I mean, I know that we still don't have final regulations, but can you speak to if that has changed the number of live credits that are required?
I'm happy to address the question. And Ms. McCochran, I believe you're still here. And please chime in if there's anything additional to add. But it is my understanding that the 27 remaining traditional continuing education hours that are able to be utilized do not have to be live or live interactive. They can be distance.
Okay, so there would be the current issue, the current requirement of so many hours of live credits would be eliminated as you understand that today.
I believe so. And Mr. McCochran, please chime in if there's anything I'm missing.
Yeah, I guess.
Hi. Sorry, I was just trying to quickly look it up just to make sure that I give the correct information. But yeah, we could do 27 and the 9 live hours. We still have to do 9 live.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay. I'll let them know that. Thank you.
And what I'll do, I'm sorry, this was Dr. Emus?
Yes.
What I can do, I can actually contact you later. I'll get your information. I have your information.
Right.
And then we can, if you have any more questions, we can go more in depth and discuss. And I can provide you with some materials to help guide you with this.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McCochran and Ms. Emus. I'm sure many people have a similar questions. I see Dr. Linda Crow would like to make a comment.
Jolinder Crow, we have sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Joe Linder Crow with the California Psychological Association. Mr. Glass-Steagall, I want to go back just to something you said, and I want to be sure I understand what you meant. You referenced several times the possibility that the regulations might be changed. Are you talking just about the implementation date, or are you saying that some of these other regulations could be changed at the OAL level?
I'm referring to only the implementation date. There is, of course, a chance that the Office of Administrative Law could come back to us and say that something in the language doesn't make sense, but we are not anticipating that. But my comments are related strictly to the implementation timeframe.
Okay. And I think another way to look at it for psychologists, in terms of their questions, it's not so much of when will they have to start using these new regulations, but for some people, it's when can they start using the regulations. So that goes to the timing issue as well. In other words, to Dr. Emu's question, if your license is going to be up for renewal in 2023 or even in late 2022, I think part of what people are wondering is, can they start using some of the alternative categories to meet their CE requirements? And so I'll just offer that perspective because it's not just that people are afraid of when these go into effect, but some people are eager for them to go into effect. And so I'm hearing again that you just don't know when OAL is going to get finished. Is that a good assessment? You just don't know when they're going to be done?
Yes, the law doesn't become effective until the Office of Administrative Law approves the regulatory package and it becomes chaptered with the Secretary of State. So even if people are trying to be proactive, it still isn't a legal avenue technically, right, until the package is through. And the Office of Administrative Law has until I believe the end of March to finish their review. But through my conversations with the attorney, he's planning a preliminary review in around the middle of January, and at that point, I should be able to speak with him and understand our options regarding the implementation date. Because when this package was all put together, we didn't anticipate 2 90-day extensions, due to COVID and all that kind of thing. So that was outside of our perspective at the time.
Sure, understood. Now, something you just said made me think of another question. If the regulations are not actually in effect until a certain date, then is it accurate to say that actually people should not be, they wouldn't be able to count any of the new categories if they participated in those prior to the active date? Is that accurate? So really everything that you accrue has to be done on the effective date or afterwards.
No, we have that section in the regs, and I apologize, I don't have the language. I don't have the section readily available, but it's the section that says that any individuals that expire between the date of X and X, right? And the first date of that period is the date that the regulations become effective. Can utilize either or scenario. They can go with the traditional
Right.
36 hours or the CPD. So they can. So it is reasonable for them to be thinking about it before the regulations become effective.
But that sounds though that they wouldn't be able to use any of the credits accrued before these new regs become effective.
Right. So, hi, this is Lizelle. So,
Yeah.
yes, so if, for example, the regulations do go into effect in March 2022, as Jason was stating, there is that period where for the year where they're able to, do a mixture of the old CE
Right.
and the current CPD. But let's say they did professional development or attending this board meeting right now,
Yes.
Today, since the regulations are not approved today, this would not count towards
Right.
their.
Okay, that's helpful. So I want to be sure about that because I mean that's the guidance that we have been giving people is we just have to wait until these go into effect. Don't try to get there's no benefit to trying to start using these other kind of categories now because the law is not in effect yet. So that's helpful. So thank you for that.
Right. And I did just want to correct one thing, and I apologize. I misspoke. The 9 hours will not be required for CPD. So for CPD, there's going to be 15 continuing professional development activities that are grouped into 4 different categories.
Correct.
So you do not have to complete the 9 hours. Not specifically 9 hours is not a requirement.
Right, and thank you for clarifying that. My understanding, having worked on these for a long time along with the board, is that once these go into effect, there will no longer be a distinction between live and distance learning. So the kind of traditional continuing education courses can be either live or distance learning. So there won't be a particular requirement for either one.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
So I think these questions are going to be good ones to include on the frequently asked question sheet that I know that the board is working on along with CPA.
Yes, we're happy to help where we can. And I previously did a quite detailed kind of walkthrough of the regulations a couple of years ago. And I think would probably do something similar again to really walk through and help explain the different parts. So the frequently asked questions will be a great complement to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Linder Crow. I don't see any other public comment, but let's just give it a moment if anybody would like to ask or make a public comment on any of these regulations that we have been looking at in item 6A. I will add one thing that the registered psychologist regulation I've been following that because I know there are many people who are interested in that category of licensure. That maybe Mr. Glassbeagle, if you could give us a quick update on what we can expect with that.
I'm sorry, Dr. Harpsheets, can you repeat the question?
The registered psychologist, I think it's on a retired license. It's on 6A number 2. And I know that there was a hearing on December 1st, and it says no one provided testimony. So once it says that it will be on the board agenda for adoption at the February board meeting, assuming it is adopted, do you have any idea how long it might take until that is actually implemented?
Thank you for restating your question. Yes, the retired package, the hearing was completed by staff. It will be back to the board in February to review any comments that were received and make any changes that may be necessary. And then after that, staff will work on the updated informative digest, final statement of reasons, and then submit the package to the Department of Consumer Affairs for their final review. Ms. Hoganson, what is the current processing timeframe on second reviews for the department right now?
If there are no comments that were received, then about 30 days is what we're estimating for DCA and then agency. And then OAL would have 30 working days still. But because this package was noticed after July 1, there will be no governor's extensions available for COVID. So we won't be in the same sort of situation as we are with CPD with the extensions.
Thank you, Ms. Hoganson. And then do keep in mind that once the package is approved by the Office of Administrative Law, unless we ask for a specific implementation date, there is a quarterly implementation. So it's like January 1, April 1, July 1, October 1, and then January 1 again. So it would fall into whatever one they're issuing those for at the time. So there could be up to 5 or 6 months, I would think, until full implementation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glassbeagle. Right. We still have the public comment box open. We'll give it just a moment in case anyone has any more. I don't see any. So, Mr. Moderator, could you please close the public comment box? Okay, we will move on to item 6B. And I would like to ask Ms. Chung to please give us the background on this item, and then Mr. Gage, I think, will be walking us through the item. Ms. Chung?
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. So 6B is our Pathways to Licensure Regulations item. So just for background, the Pathways to Licensure is made up of two parts. The first is proposed amendments to statutes, and the second one is regulations. So these changes were initially proposed by staff back in 2014, and we have made proposed amendments to both the licensure committee and the board, and all board members deliberated on these proposed amendments through multiple meetings. And also we solicited input from our stakeholders. The final review was completed by the board and approved the language at the November 2018 board meeting. So Finally, we are able to get all the statutory change for pathways through legislation this year through Senate Bill 801. So some the statutory changes have become effective on 1/1 this year. So after we got the statutory changes authority, then the next step is for us to look at the regulation changes portion and put it into a motion to implement, to put the changes request for approval for these changes. So because of pandemic, we're staff taking a fresh look at the regulatory language to make any additional amendments that will help remove any further barriers for clarity and efficiency. So we have made some changes in the attached language and highlighted those changes that made by staff in yellow highlights.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chung.
Absolutely.
Mr. Gage, then, would you please walk us through the regulations review?
Certainly, and I'll ask Stephanie here to walk with me, and I'll operate the screen here and capture comments in real time.
Could you also tell us which of the items in the hand carry that, well, I guess we can follow along on your screen too.
That's right. Yes. The hand carry item, the name of the document, second, would be the one that with yesterday's date and says 6B pathways regulations, which is the same document that we are seeing on the screen here.
Okay. We have application for licensure, EPPP application, pathways draft, application to take complete, and then pathways regulations. Okay,
yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Gage?
Dr. Hapshit, let me, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. So the first change here we made is adding additional definition for licensees as highlighted in yellow.
And we want to look for language from, if you could just tell us kind of what perspective do we want to use as we review these?
So these, because the language are already approved previously, so we can ask the committee members to focus on the changes that are made in yellow highlights. And if you may have any questions or discussion, you may talk about them and ask us question. Otherwise, we can go. If you have specific questions on any yellow highlight changes, we can talk about that. Or if not, we can go through them one by one as well on the changes that are highlighted in yellow.
I think that would be helpful. So I have a question. As we are looking at number G and H lines 20 and 24, does this mean that somebody could now, if their training was in clinical counseling or school psychology, they could designate, say on their letterhead or their signature line, they could call themselves a health service psychologist? Is that what this is saying?
So I'm going to just step in real quick. So this was the language that the board approved back in November of 2018. And we do have in our statute guidance for scope of practice and requirements for licensure as a psychologist. This was terminology that the board approved, but I don't think we ever really got into a deep discussion on these definitions, and I'm curious, the insight from first Ms. Chung and then Ms. Hoganson on how this terminology could be used in the question that Dr. Harpsheets just asked.
So Ms. Hoganson, could you help us out there?
So in terms of the defining the general applied psychologist and health services psychologist, it's if they had gone through that training. Now, the regulation does not specify specifics of that training, and if you wanted to do that at some point, you could, in terms of a number of hours or a specific certificate or degree or anything like that. But they would be able to use that title, yes.
I'm wondering, just because of how the public might be confused or not, if somebody writes, calls themselves general applied psychologist and somebody else says health service psychologist, and then the question comes up, well, what's the difference? And why are you this and that person that? That's why I'm asking. But I guess they could do that and not be misrepresenting themselves as long as they're following the regulation, correct?
Right. According to this, as long as they've had some training in each of those fields, they could use that title. Now, if at some point you thought that there was an issue with people overstepping, you could, the board as a whole could adopt additional regulations to further define what that training entailed.
I see. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Ms. Nystrom, any questions that you might have on this area?
No, I'm okay with it so far. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Harpsheets, just a procedural question, and I'm just wondering if you want to go section by section and just kind of have a consensus and then move forward and then take a motion at the end if you guys are at that stage. I just want to kind of know what the guidance is for how we're going to proceed on, approving each of the sections on this document.
I think it's
Makes
fine.
sense.
Yes, I think it's fine to go section by section and just have a consensus among the two committee members and take a motion at the end. Ms. Nystrom, does that sound okay with you?
I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to the application section. And so if Ms. Chung or Mr. Gage can just give us a brief statement about how is this really, is it clarified? Is the information clarified, or what was really changed? What makes this different?
Thank you, Dr. Hapshi. So for 1381 application section, we have included here, incorporated some forms by reference. So this is to clarify exactly which form that the applicant has to use. Because currently our form, the names might be confusing to some, because the first step is for applicants to take the EPPP exam as the first step of the licensure process. But our application just mentioned applications for licensure, and then some will ask us that I'm not ready for licensure. I'm just wanting to take the EPPP exam first. And then so we think that it will be clearer to put out the 3 steps for licensure in regs that the first step is to apply to take the EPPP, and then these are the following things that they will need to submit to support the application, and then B would be the then after they pass the EPPP, then they will take the complete the law and ethics exam, and these are the materials that they will be needed for this application. And then the last step would be to apply for license after they pass both the exam. And these are the materials that they will need to be submitted to support their application.
Okay. Ms. Nystrom, any questions on that?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Chung, can you briefly just mention what is this process now and how does that differ from what we've laid out in the reg there?
Okay, yes, absolutely. So the process is actually similar, but we're just clarifying, making changes to the name of the forms and explicitly write out what is necessary for each step. So we are kind of like transitioning the process and kind of the same process, but make it more clear in writing what is necessary for each step. And then in the attachment that in your hand carry folder, we have provided the draft forms as well that is meant for use for this section to be incorporated by reference. And we have included instructions on those forms, what they need to do, and what they need to provide to satisfy the requirements for each step.
Okay. Mine for some reason is saying I don't have permission to download those, but I think we can move forward right now, and I'll try it again. Sometimes it then works. Okay, so let's move on to withdrawal of application.
So for this section, we have made a reference change to not like a change, but make the language simpler and more straightforward. Excuse me, about this section.
Okay, so it's just clarifying and making it more, like you said, straightforward. Okay. All right. And Ms. Nystrom, if you just jump in if you have any questions. Otherwise, if I don't hear from you, I'll just assume we can move on. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So the petition for hearing, I see, looks like it's been struck. And so we'll move on to should we? Yes. Okay. You take us through and let us know which you would like us to look at next, Ms. Chung.
Okay, will do. So there's no changes until, I'm gonna find a page here, until 1386 section. Right here. So we just make a reference change here because of the law change recently.
Okay.
And then the next one will be on the next page at the top. We added a clarifying language, what is necessary for them to provide us to show to verify that they are in the exemption status, and by providing example of what can be submitted as a verification.
Okay.
And the next one in D paragraph is also the same. We made some clarifying language here to reference the waiver, and then to provide language on the necessity to provide us evidence. about having the waiver to substantiate their registration with the board is not required.
Okay, so where it says, I'm starting with the word however, so proof of internship on transcript, is that saying that the, they could prove the internship enrollment on a transcript, or, or they could do a copy of the official internship placement? Is that what it's saying?
Yes.
So it's or, I mean, to me, it looked like, oh, do I need to provide both of those? Or can I provide one or the other? Ms. Nystrom, do you see it that way, or?
What is the intent of it?
Isn't the intent is if they are in a setting that does not require registration with the board, they have to verify that they actually did this formal training. And the way they can verify that is to show either a copy of the placement contract or the, where am I at? Hold on, I lost my place. They could show it on their transcript, or they could show it on this the internship placement contract. And I think if they're in a postdoctoral position, they're probably not going to have a transcript that they would show that on. I guess it's confusing to me a little bit, but I'm wondering.
It appears it's an alternative way to go, but that seems okay to me, but it would be interesting to see how the other folks see it.
So for you, it seems clear.
As an alternative, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's move on then. That's fine. Okay. Okay, Ms. Chung, we're ready to move on then.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry.
So just to clarify, the section that you just looked at is about pre-doc, and then we here in Evan, if you would move up a few lines up on your document. Sorry, I want to see there. Thank you. So this paragraph is about postdoc training.
Yeah. I see.
So
Yeah.
then we also asked about verification for them to let us know that they are in actual formal postdoc training by providing an example.
I see. Thank you for clarifying that. But the other is really more about pre-doc, so they would have a transcript. Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And then the next one is also the same because this is using the waivers also pathways for postdoc, for trainees to accrue postdoc hours. So we have asked them to provide us the verification if they're using this pathway.
Okay. Good. Can you, when we talk about the waiver in here, is there a formal process, or it is for obtaining, when it talks about approved waiver, is there a formal process that's going to happen, or is it a situation where the regulations are this, so there's no need to register, so there's no particular process to go through? Could you clarify that?
Sure. So this waiver is approved by the Department of Healthcare Services.
Mm-hmm.
And from my understanding is when there's a trainee at a provider and they're working with the county and the county would help connect them to obtain the waiver from the department.
Okay.
So we're not involved in the process. And the authority for this waiver is provided in the Welfare and Institutions Code. So in the end, we will only find out that the trainee is on this pathways when they apply for licensure and state that, oh, I have accrued this experience through an approved waiver under the Welfare and Institutions Code, and this is a copy of the approved waiver. And then so we're able to verify in that way.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
And then the section showing on the screen here is about the supervised professional experience regarding the submission of the verification of experience. So we have incorporated the procedure on how to submit in the form instruction. And our intention is to remove the sealed envelope part because it seems unnecessary, or we wanted to provide a more streamlined process for our applicants and their supervisors. So we're going to remove that part, and the stricken field down there, what is saying here, what the verification shall contain, we have moved this part to the form that it will be incorporated by reference.
Okay.
So that's why the language is stricken here.
Okay.
So if I can add a little bit of context, initially we were, the board was receiving verification of experience forms from applicants, and we would be a clearinghouse for those, and we may or may not receive a ultimate license application from that individual. So in order to prevent the clearinghouse effect, we created a process by which the applicant could submit, along with their application, the verification of experience form. We added the requirement that the supervisor sign and seal the envelope that was going to accompany that form. What we have found in that process is that sometimes there are issues with the mail, with us getting those, and it has been an issue. So while we were trying to solve a problem, we kind of created a different problem in the process. So if we can receive that verification of experience document once an application has been filed, then we still eliminate our clearinghouse issue, but then we can more easily receive it from the supervisor and still have that kind of integrity in place. Am I missing anything, Ms. Chung?
Nope, that's a very accurate addition. Thank you, Ms. Ork.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Gives us perspective and context. Okay. Are we ready then? We can do 1387.10.
This section talks about the requirement for trainees who have already obtained the hours. We think that it's good to clarify that even though when they're in trainee status and they're on one of the pathways to perform psychological functions, we believe that they should also observe the comply with the supervision requirements that is necessary for trainees.
Okay. Okay. So I see on the next one, this is just a clarification of the title of the brochure.
Correct.
Same with.
And yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, then we have the title again clarified, made accurate.
Yes. And then in this section, we are trying to evolve with the professions, and we added make changes here regarding the face-to-face supervision. So we make changes from face-to-face, which has traditionally mean that supervision has to be done physically in person, face-to-face with between the primary supervisors and trainee. And then so we have made changes to allow that to be conducted through HIPAA compliant technology instead of have to be physically in the same room.
So if these are approved by the board, and then what would be the next step at this point? Just to give perspective here.
I believe we will work with our regulatory council to work on the package and prepare this for submission to the Office of Administrative Law for their review.
So it
Mr.
sounds,
Glass-Steagall, feel free to chime in.
so it sounds like by adding this sentence about the supervision by HIPAA compliant technology, that would then allow for what we have now as a current waiver of face-to-face supervision to continue. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's
Dr.
our.
Hartshorn,
Oh, sorry.
if I could
Go ahead.
chime in, Heather Hoganson, Reg Counsel here. In terms of real time, we wanted to get some input from the committee as to what you feel is required. Is, what does real time look like to you, as in terms of, what is actually required? Is it just that it's an interactive, as opposed to leaving voicemails back and forth? That is text messaging okay, or do you have to see a physical, does it have to be a FaceTime or Zoom or Skype sort of thing where there's body language being seen? Or, what is the minimum and maximum that you would consider acceptable that for technology to work here?
I will say that I think it does need to be face-to-face in terms of it could be through virtual means, but I don't think that as a supervisor, the person is responsible. It's that person, it's the supervisor's license that is on the line. And I would think, and having been a supervisor in the past, it would be important to see that body language, tone of voice that you can't get through emails or text messages. I mean, those kinds of things will potentially go on, but that the actual kind of face-to-face, whether it's in person or through technology, would be very important. And in a way, I think that's similar to what we see in clinical settings with clients too, that you really miss something when you can't see that person, at least through video means.
Fantastic. Thank you for that input.
And this is really nice, Sharma. And I just, as a public member, I see it through the same lens, that I think that it would be important to have, face-to-face, again, in person, or through some sort of technological FaceTime or Zoom or something, but to actually have that real one-on-one versus, arbitrary text messages or something else, to ensure that. And then my only other question is on the HIPAA compliant technology. Is that defined?
Yes, I think it is defined in terms of level of encryption is what the major focus is. And as far as I know, it's the encryption and that protects the confidentiality, which I think is essential. There might be more to it since I'm not an expert on that. Just as a clinician, that's what I look for. I'm wondering, so when we say real time, I talked about what that meant to me. but in some way, I guess it could be interpreted that if I'm the supervisee and you're the supervisor, Ms. Bond, I send you a text using HIPAA compliant technology, that would be acceptable, which I wouldn't want it to be that way. But does it read that way to you?
I think I heard my name in the hypothetical. Was that directed to me
Yeah,
or Rebecca?
well, yes, I'll repeat it. I was asking you if it reads like this, and I say to you, I'm the supervisee and you're the supervisor. Okay, we're going to spend 1 hour of texting because it's real time, and I'm using HIPAA compliant technology to send my texts to you.
A little more direct. Of course, I'm going to defer to your reg counsel on this. But yeah, I think the way you just read that on its face,
Yes.
that theoretically could include texting.
Okay, and then I wanted to say right above that real-time line, it does talk about board certified psychiatrist. And didn't SB 801 changed? Oh, I guess we could still delegate. The primary supervisor could delegate, right, to these other categories of mental health professional. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so I think we're back to maybe we need to be a little clearer on what this means.
Right, and Dr. Harbsheets, that's why we wanted to bring this up to you today. So we
Yes.
needed that input, and then we can, craft a sentence that says, for purposes of this section, real time requires the ability to see and hear, but can be virtual. And I
Yeah,
think that's what we're hearing from you. So we can add that, but that's why we wanted to get your input on that.
yeah,
I think that would be helpful.
yeah. So Ms. Nystrom, you agree with that too?
I do, yes.
Yes. Okay. So do we need to come up with that wording now to clarify real time, which requires the ability to see and hear the supervisee or to see and for the
And
supervisor?
if you're comfortable delegating that to staff, we can add that, and then it will be in the next version. And if you send this up to the board, then you'll see it there as well.
I'm comfortable with that. Are you, Ms. Nystrom?
I am, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Are we at 1387.5 SPE log?
Yes, this is the next change. We added here on line 43, typed or legibly, because we intend that this SPE log could be maintained either by a physical copy or electronically.
Okay. So here,
This is Julie. I think I've asked this question before, but Breeze doesn't allow for practitioners to log in their education credit time, correct?
I'm sorry, Ms. Nystrom, can you repeat that?
Does Breeze doesn't allow for for practitioners to, or applicants to log in their education time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That we don't have that. Breeze doesn't have that capability.
Right, thank you.
Are you talking about, Ms. Nystrom, are you talking about their graduate education or continuing education?
Probably continuing education, but I think I was curious if it was for continuing, if graduation, but if it doesn't do it for continuing, it wouldn't do it for graduate. So I think that answered my question.
Okay. Okay, so again here in line 10, we're at number 5, we have real time listed again. So this time it's got a hyphen between real and time, so I guess we should be consistent. However, so would we say add something here that would say as defined above, or Ms. Hoganson, would we do, how would we do it that way?
We would just say, you know, for purposes of this section, and so it would be in you know, the definition would be listed at the beginning, but yes, we would make sure that they are either both hyphenated or both not hyphenated.
Okay, and then in terms of the definition, because we talked about what does that really mean up above, would that real time again be defined in this section or referred to the previous section?
So and depending on where we put it, both ones would be something like, for purposes of either this section or this article,
Yes.
real time requires the ability to see and hear synchronously, either in physical proximity or virtually using HIPAA compliant technology.
Okay.
So something like that.
Okay, great. Okay.
Ms. Hogan said, this is Ms. Nystrom. Question for, would we craft that definition? My question is if DCA has a similar definition for other boards, and if we could look to kind of be consistent, you know, across the board with what other folks are doing, if it's similar to the real-time face-to-face requirement.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to search and see if anyone else has actually defined this yet. I haven't seen it personally, but that's not to say that it isn't out there. And then we can also, instead of virtually, we could say remotely. That some of the telework agreements are using the word remote now instead of virtual. So we can definitely, as things are evolving, match that.
Great, thank you.
Good. Thanks, Ms. Nystrom. Okay. I think we're at what, 1391.5.
In this section, sorry, I'll wait till the screen's ready.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this section, we made the correct references to the regs regarding this change. Is a clarification.
Okay, so here again, we have the real-time piece. So that should then be consistent.
Noted. We will make it consistent when we work with Reg Council about the language.
Okay.
And then here we, like previously, we have made consistent changes about the name of the publication and the reference section.
Okay.
And then the rest clean up to make consistent referring to the same word trainee.
Got it. Okay.
And that's it for the language change that we proposed.
Okay, Ms. Nystrom, do you have any other questions or comments about what we have gone through, or any other aspect of this item?
No, I'm comfortable with our review. Thank you.
Okay. And Ms. Chung, is there anything else that we need to consider in this item before we make a motion and then open for public comment?
We have the draft forms for you, but if you you may also review those and let us know if you may have any changes or agree with those as well.
Okay. I for some reason I'm not being allowed to open them.
Okay.
Not sure why, but my computer says I can't open them. And those were the ones that came into the box yesterday, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, but those that I see, these are drafts. It says application for EPPP and application for CAPLE and for licensure. Can you just tell me what's in those since I'm not able to open them? Is it?
Can we share the document?
Oh, that would be good.
Certainly. Which one would you like to start with?
Licensure, application for licensure, pathways draft. So this is telling us the application that people applying for licensure would receive. Is that correct?
Yes, so we'll make this form available on our website, and our goal is to make this form available through Breeze as well.
Okay.
So you can see that this is we mirror this on an existing courtesy form that we have been using, but we have added clarify information on the instruction page. So if Mr. Gage can go back to the last page. Thank you. So yes.
Before we do that, how about if we take let's take a 10-minute break so that we can get these forms in a format that Ms. Nystrom and I can also review them at the same time besides the screen sharing. And then what we will do is go over the different forms and then take public comment. How does that
sounds good?
Okay, so
I can provide those to you and Ms. Nystrom.
Okay, great. So it's 11:32. Let's come back at 11:42, and then that will make it easier for us to review those forms. Thank you very much. And Mr. Moderator, could you put us on break until 11:42? Real time. So, Mr. Moderator, could you please open the public comment box?
We have opened the Q&A for public comment. We will be displaying directions on the screen momentarily. In the meantime, if you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen.
And
You
so,
will be
I'm sorry, to
Go
clarify,
ahead.
this will be public comment on the discussion about real time. And then after that, we will take public comment on the general language change revisions.
We have a request for public comment. We'll be calling on Elizabeth Winkleman in just a moment. Bear with us, please. Elizabeth, we have sent you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hey, it's Elizabeth Winkleman, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from the California Psychological Association. My suggestion is to insert audio visual prior to HIPAA compliant technology, because I believe that that is the most commonly used way to refer to the having both the visual and audio.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
And I do have comments on other aspects, but if I understand you correctly, Dr. Harpsheets, then that would be at a later time for comments about the other changes to the regulations?
Yes, I just wanted to keep the comments on real time contained to this, and then right after this, we will move to the more general comments.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments on the discussion about the use of real time? Okay, I see none. And so that comment from Dr. Winkleman about inserting the words audio visual has been noted. And Ms. Hoganson, I think you'll be working with staff on that. And that sounds like it would be a great way to ensure that there is a visual component to this.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Dr. Harpsheets.
Okay. Now, if we could have comments on the language as we forms the language changes just in general.
We are still open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We have another request for comment. We will be calling on you momentarily. Elizabeth Winkleman.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Winkleman again from CPA. So before we move to, before I start with my comments, I just wanted to thank you all again for the work that you've done, both the committee members, the other board members, and the staff in streamlining the laws and the regulations. I think it's going to be very helpful to the licensees and applicants and trainees. So, but I do have a number of comments about the regulatory changes. The first one would be in 1380.3 definitions, section E about licensee.
Okay, maybe can we get to that here? Give us a second to get to that.
And just as an aid in locating these things, I've realized the line numbers are not pertinent. So if you give me a page number, if the page number is available to you on the bottom of the screen, that could help.
Is page 1, Mr. Gage?
Right, okay, so it's, wait, right, and E. So it's licensee, the definition of licensee. So I would suggest that you consider changing that to licensee means a psychologist, because a registrant is really not the same thing as a licensee. And I've seen this come up in various contexts where people get confused as if a psychological assistant, are they licensed? Are they independently licensed? I was actually literally just a few weeks ago contacted by APA thinking that that they were independently licensed. There's really a different meaning to licensee and to registrant. And in addition, if you refer back to, we don't have to look at it now, I know you're familiar with it, but Business and Professions Code 2902, licensed psychologist means if an individual to whom a license has been issued. So, so I think it would be very confusing and not really, and potentially problematic to define a registrant as a licensee. So that's my first comment, and I think it might be most useful if it's acceptable to you, Dr. Hartjeets, for me to perhaps engage in more of a, I know it's harder online, but more of a discussion as we go through these.
Yes,
Could I have
I
several
think
comments?
so. I think that's a great point, because there are some states that actually register psychologists. They call them registered psychologists too. And I think that could add to the confusion, maybe the suggestion that, oh, they have two categories of psychologists in California, which isn't the case. So you are suggesting that we drop those words, or registrant.
Correct, or you can have registrant, but as a separate thing. A registrant means somebody registered with the board, but I do not think, I think it would be very confusing to leave that or registrant in section E, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm making notes. Okay.
Ms. Hoganson, did you want to address that issue before we move on?
The regulations were intended to have a group so that we wouldn't have to keep saying licensee or registrant. But we can definitely take a look at that and see if that would impact any of the other places where we've used licensee.
Okay. Got it.
If I can just add real quickly, the general provisions of the Business and Professions Code refers to a licensee in a general sense as someone who is licensed or registered by the board. So this definition is consistent with the general provision definition in the Business and Professions Code. And as we're going through the regulations and getting rid of his or her, we'd like to be able to generally refer to an applicant or a licensee. So that's was the background why we added that here.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for considering that comment. And my next comment is on the same page, and it refers to the discussion about general applied psychologist and health service psychologist right there. So I think perhaps a little more discussion of what this would mean would be a good idea. My understanding is that psychologists get a license as a quote psychologist unquote. There's no general applied psychologist license or separate health service psychologist license. So if this is the definition used for this part of the regulations, I don't think that would confer necessarily that they can use the title general applied psychologist. Again, referring back to the Business and Professions Code, it doesn't really address that, but it does, again, define licensed psychologists and lists several things, titles that can be used, but does not include general applied psychologists and health service psychologists. So I feel that that is a bit confusing as well.
Are you saying it's confusing to the public, Dr. Winkleman?
Or even to the psychologist as to what they can call themselves. My understanding is you can only call yourselves a licensed psychologist because you are licensed as a psychologist. You're not licensed as a general applied psychologist or separately as a health service psychologist. So both. I think it could be confusing to licensees as to what they can call themselves, and then also confusing to definitely confusing to consumers, because they'll be like, wait, my psychologist is not a health service psychologist, but there's others that are a health service psychologist. So
and somehow that health service psychologist sounds like that person might have, to the general public, might have more training than somebody who is calling themselves a general applied psychologist, which isn't necessarily the case at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Could Ms. Sorek or Ms. Hoganson give us some background on how those terms were identified or developed?
I think how this was brought up in the past was, I think this came up at Association of State and Provincial Psychology Board discussions, because other states have reference or definitions to these different types of providers. And I think that's how the discussion began. The language was kind of put in, and it really wasn't much of a controversy or issue, and we kind of moved on. So this is really a policy call of the committee and ultimately the board, and for you guys to kind of discuss the merits of having that. I don't know from a staff perspective, and maybe Ms. Monterrubio or Ms. Chung can chime in if I'm speaking out of turn, but I don't know if there's any advantage from a staff perspective or an enforcement perspective from adding the definitions, but I could be wrong. Ms. Monterrubio, have you had any questions about the differentiation or the types of psychologists?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I answered. I don't know what happened. I apologize. No, Antoinette, we have not received any inquiries, as to my knowledge, about the differences. We are not receiving complaints about this issue.
I would say that if National Register registrants for years have had the sense that, or the message that they could designate themselves as health service psychologists in their signature lines, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure how, that would have fit with California law. And I think that's been a question that's come up and been confusing in the past, with the suggestion that somebody who does designate that means that they have some special training, say in behavioral medicine, which isn't necessarily the case. So it does seem like it could be confusing. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I was just going to add, as a public member, that reviewing it, if I was, I wouldn't know what it meant necessarily. So I could see where it would add to the confusion of someone seeking a psychologist, not necessarily knowing, or misreading into, specialty a psychologist may.
Right.
That would be my.
Okay. Dr. Winkleman, can you move on with other comments? And then as a committee, we will come back and look at each of those.
Sure. And to clarify, I think that those words may have been put in there to specify where how the training is happening for those two different types of psychologists. And I think that is not a problem at all. I think it's good to clarify what kind of training is needed to obtain the license and what kind of supervision. It's more the idea of using it as a label. But yeah, I'm glad to move on to my next comment, which is in section 1387 on page 10 of 34. Let's see, where is this? It's at the bottom of page 10 in a paragraph A, right? So in that paragraph A, now I may have missed something, but to me, I'm wondering what the definition of internship at this point. I think previously, to be exempt from registration, a person had to be in an APA or KPIC approved internship. But now, to me, that is unclear. But again, maybe I'm missing something. But if I look at the current language in 2911, to which this refers, it says that the postdoctoral placement must be approved by APA or KPIC, but I'm not sure what is needed for the internship. Like it's a bit of a loose definition sometimes.
Maybe Ms. Chung, could you comment on that for us?
Yes. The 2911 expands the exemption to students who are in graduate training, right? As long as they're in an internship class. So this language was the intention to do the expansion as well previously. is it not coming? Is it not coming out as the way it is to you?
So
This, yeah, because this is, from my best recollection, this is part of the pathway statute linked to the pathway reg change.
so this is what you're saying, Ms. Chung, then, is that this is an internship arranged for the student, the pre-doctoral student, through the school.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be an APIC or KPIC internship. It's arranged through the school, and therefore it has a level of validity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that clarify it, Dr. Winkleman?
Yes, I think that would be fine. Yes, thanks so much, Ms. Chung.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then my next comment is on page, really a question too, on page 13 of 34 in the center about the supervision agreement. Anyway, and I apologize for the voluminous comments. I'm always looking out for what might confuse our psychologists and applicants and trying to get as much clarity as possible. So I apologize that I have so many.
They're very appreciated because this will help, I think, the staff later on if it's clear, So thank you.
Again, in this one, I think I may have missed something, but I see that in that paragraph 10, there's a deletion of the requirement for the supervision agreement. So I'm wondering, has that supervision agreement requirement been moved to a different part of the regulations that I missed, or has it actually been deleted and there's no supervision agreement required anymore?
So Ms. Chung, could you help us there?
Yes. I think the board previously approved the removal of the supervision agreement portion.
So I'm wondering, Dr. Harpsheets, if you could discuss that a little. I don't really recall that, and I feel like the supervision agreement has a lot of weight to it and a lot of information in it.
Yes. I don't remember that either, but we can definitely research that. And I know that there are times this committee has also looked at what is the supervision agreement in various sections. Ms. Chung, could you find that for us, or maybe Ms. Sorek, you might remember when the board removed the supervision agreement requirement?
We probably would need some time to look that through previous board meetings minutes to capture that.
Okay.
If I may, this is Heather Hoganson, Reg Council. I believe some of that information was being put into a form, but I could be wrong.
We have the verification of experience form. I can look at it here. If it maybe asks for that kind of information. I don't see that in that form, but we should, let's look at when we go through forms next, let's see if some of this information is actually in there. Okay.
Great, and I think this might be something worth discussing at the next board meeting, because on the one hand, certainly it would be simpler for applicants if there's no supervision agreement, but it also would remove some of the structure that's in place to make sure that people know what is expected during their supervised professional experience. And if Dr. Harpsheets and I both don't recall it being removed, it's perhaps slid by some other board members as well. And I think it's a big enough piece to discuss, but that will be up to you, Dr. Harpsheets.
I think you're right. I think it's a quality assurance for consumer protection too. So I'm making a note of that too. And let's keep in mind when we look at the forums to see if some of this other information that we wanted to have in a supervisory agreement is contained in those forms. So, okay. Number 4, I'm making just a note of your comments.
Great. And the last one is just a thank you. On page 19 of 34 at the bottom, I mean, there have been many good changes, but this one I know is going to really provide some relief to people who have had, you know, medical issues or vacations and or cared for other family members that have medical issues. And this is the one that's allowing interim supervision if the primary supervisor is unavailable. So I just wanted to point out a special thank you for that. And that concludes my questions and comments. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I was going to comment that in on page 19, where it's C and it says if the SPE is obtained in areas of general applied psychology, and if we make some change later, that would this be different than the health service psychology? So it's something we'll have to think about if you know how that's written. Just making that note. Okay.
I do have one more suggestion now that you pointed that out, Dr. Harpsheets, which is it may be that G and H could be changed to general applied psychology and health service psychology, so that it would be clear that what you're talking about is the definition for what types of supervision are required, but not necessarily a title that the psychologist would use professionally.
Yes, yes. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Thank you,
Thanks
Dr.
again.
Winkleman.
Thank you.
Let's see if there are any other public comment.
There are no additional requests for public comment at this time. Would you like to wait a moment?
No, I think it's okay to close the box at this point. Okay.
Public comments are closed for the moment.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Nystrom, let's go back and talk about Dr. Winkleman's comments as a committee when she talked about at the very beginning licensee and dropping the word registrant. Ms. Hogan, since you said you would look into that, any thoughts, Ms. Nystrom, that you might have as a committee member?
Yes, one I can see where it could be confusing, or you know where just striking or registrant makes sense, but I can also see from the board staff perspective trying to be able to use the licensee to refer to a group, but maybe it's important to strike out or registrant licensed, or registrant, give it its own definition, and then refer to psychologists as licensees or registrants instead of he's or she's.
So you're saying that maybe we clarify what is meant by registrant? Is that
Correct.
what you're saying? And then that would still make it consistent with other business and professions language that I think was mentioned. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Making a note. All right. Then the question of the general applied psychologist and health service psychologist, Dr. Winkleman was suggesting that might be confusing to licensees and or the public. What are your thoughts about that?
So I like the suggestion instead of referring to the title as general applied psychologist, but general applied psychology, to kind of separate it from the health service psychology, but taking off the ist in both of those cases. I would be open to that. What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that strikes me is if I was doing forensic psychology, it's way beyond general psychology, that we are expected to have a level of extra specialized training in forensics. Um, and and so it just kind of struck me as inconsistent for that to be in there. Um, and I hear Ms. Sorick saying that this, people are referring to themselves, I know at least as health service psychologists, and sometimes at the board when we've seen that and wondered, well, what does that really mean? And then I'm familiar with what National Register, the people who are registrants definitely use that. So I guess I'm struggling with, is it confusing? And it was something I had brought up earlier. Ms. Sort, could you say just a little bit more for us about that, about just the idea of having it in there, and because I do remember conversations about that if we are to refer to ourselves as licensed psychologists and technically not even saying clinical psychologist. So this sort of changes that. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
I will try. So again, it was my understanding that at the time when at that time it was called the License Committee, was discussing this issue, there were some national movement to policy changes to reflect kind of a health service psychologist versus a gap psychologist. And we did not get too many questions at the board about the difference between the two. We've always said that, a psychologist is a general license, and you can't practice outside your knowledge, skills, or ability, because then it could become an enforcement issue. You can't practice neuropsychology without having training and experience in that area, for an example. But I think this was more of a national discussion that kind of got imposed on the pathways discussion. As far as staff goes, we haven't gotten a lot of questions about gap psychologist versus the general license. I don't mean to evade the question, but that's kind of my remembering about this. And again, this review goes back to 2014 when we started making these changes. So apologies for some gaps in my memory, but that's my understanding. I know that in quite a few years ago, we did expand our Business and Professions Code 2903 about scope of practice and what defines the profession of psychology, to incorporate more what could be considered gap psychology, about organizational effectiveness and some of those other terminology into 2903. So I think that was to help some of that differentiation, but this would go one step further. But what I'm hearing is that may or may not be helpful both for our licensees and for consumers. So
Yeah,
sorry if that didn't help.
Yeah, no, it helps. I feel it's confusing and not necessarily conveying an accurate picture of what's happening. For example, school psychology as a degree was just in SB 801 added to our qualifications for licensure. And I'm not sure how that fits into health service psychologist. And like I said, a person doing forensic work is way beyond general applied psychology. So I'm feeling like maybe we just get rid of those altogether and stay with what we have defined, used in the past. As you said, we're not getting a lot of questions about gap psychology, and recognize that if someone wants to list themselves as, say, for example, I say I practice forensic psychology, then it's up to me to be able to demonstrate my qualifications for that. But that comes beyond the general license to practice psychology in this state. That's my thought. And Ms. Nystrom, your thoughts?
I agree with, I agree. I just, I just want to make sure that it's not confusing. So I appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I think we could go one of two ways. We could make a motion to address these changes in these regulations with what we've talked about. But the one thing that would get left out of that is addressing the idea of the supervision agreement, because we would not have reviewed the forms. So the other option is to wait until we've reviewed the forms to see if that supervision agreement information that we think would be important is included in there or not. And then we would have a combined motion that talks about the general language and the regulations and the forms.
How about I was just going to add, how about if we go ahead and take a look at the forms and see if that addresses our concerns, and then we can just do a combined motion.
Okay. Ms. Sorg, do you see any issues with that at all?
I do not.
Okay, then let's do that. And so let's see, the first one, application for licensure form. Okay. Now, one question I had on this is we, with CPD, there are, and I'm not sure if it's in the CPD regulations or not, there are some new continuing education requirements, but would those not be a part of the application for licensure? Those are for already licensed people, is that correct? Anybody can answer that.
Dr. Habshi, sorry, would you mind repeating your question?
Yes, as I'm looking at the application for licensure, and we have these pre-licensure course requirements, well, I should just ask it a different way. Are there any changes that might be coming about? Like, I'm looking at the changes for that are included with CPD, and I don't know if those impact pre-licensure coursework.
Pre-licensure coursework requirements are in the pathways language by itself, so they have their own standalone section.
Yes.
I don't believe the CPT changes would impact particularly any of the pre-licensure courses.
Okay. I thought I had read, I don't know, that something about the training in aging and long-term care. Oh, I guess that's for the continuing education, that was going to be eliminated for, because we were required to take one course, I think, in that at one point. Is that correct?
I believe you're referring to the section that was eliminated because all licensees should have been complied with that. I think that section was made when the aging and long-term care was first become available for pre-licensure courses. So they want to have the same requirements for licensee as well. So they have to comply in their renewal period, I think.
Yes, so that, but that, nothing has changed in these pre-licensure courses, right?
No, no. And the changes, we are expanding all the courses to be able to comply to the 3 ways that they can be, like in the suicide risk and suicide assessment and risk training. Suicide risk assessment training, I'm sorry. So the 3 ways is you can get that experience or pre-licensure coursework met through your graduate training, your course applied training, or through a class, I believe.
Okay,
Yes.
right. Okay, great. The fee of $400 is not changing, correct?
We are just using the fee as stated in the current language as well.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any thoughts on this form?
The only question I had was for the application. So the only way to submit the application is through hard copy. Is that accurate? You can't do it online?
Ms. Chung?
Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. The goal is to make this application also available through Breeze. So we have plans to make that available online for applicants.
Okay, and so then at that time, then this form would be updated?
Yes.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take public comment as we go through each form. So, Mr. Moderator, could you please open the public comment box?
We are now open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will take comments in the order they are received. Oh, and when you submit your comment, please send it to all participants.
I see no public comment. Could you please close the comment box?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, which form, Ms. Chung, would you suggest we look at next?
How about this new instruction page for them to let them know what is necessary for them to submit to support this application. So you see on bullet number 4. So we provide this information, which can also be found on websites for them here for convenience.
Okay. And is this application, is the information that's requested basically determined by ASPPB?
No, this is by requirements in our regulations.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any questions on this?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, could you please open the public comment box for any comments or questions on this particular form?
We are now open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Please send your comment to all participants, and we will be taking comments in the order they are received. Seeing no request for public comment, would you like to close the feature?
Yes, please. Okay, Ms. Chung, which would be the next form we should review?
Let's take a look at the application to take the plea, if the
Okay.
committee would like to.
Okay. It's interesting on that front page. It sounds like what you have done in providing these boxes, I'm not sure if they were there before or not, but they help, seems like it would help that person to go through the process in a more sort of organized thought process. And so, but I'm wondering if I was an applicant and I checked these boxes sort of in the middle of the page, that I've been licensed in another state, or I have CPQ or National Register certification or ABPP, then I don't have to have passed the EPPP. I don't have to check that first box. Is that correct?
Yes, because then with these requirements, then there will be, I mean, like with the certification, then they will have different instructions to provide to us regarding their application.
Okay. So this walks people through this, and it shows the fee of 129 now. So this is an updated fee, correct?
This is the current fee.
Oh.
So this form is based on what was the draft language right now.
Uh-huh.
And what we allow to, and this happens to be the same fee as the current examination fee as of now.
Okay. What was it before? Prior
I think it has always been 129.
Oh, it has?
Yes.
I must be thinking of something else. Sorry for that confusion.
Hey, Dr. Harbsheets, this is Jason.
Yeah.
I think what you may be thinking of is the regulatory package that we have right now to increase the CPLEE fee from $129 to, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's like 256 or something like that. But that is not the fee as of the fee today is still $129 while that regulatory package goes through the process.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good. I thought I can't be really, but yes, because I know that we discussed this in one of our committee meetings, and then at a subsequent board meeting, that at the $129, it's costing the board to provide these exams. Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspico. We will be sure to make any updates for the when this language is ready to go through the OAL process.
Great, thank you. Ms. Nystrom, any comments or questions on this form?
The only question I have is when it says I've been licensed in another state, is it important for them to note where else they're licensed or no?
I'm sorry, Ms. Nystrom, I missed the last part.
I was just asking where it says I have been licensed in another state, Canadian province, or U.S. territory for more than 2 years. Is it important for them to know where else they might be licensed?
I think the regulations allow for these places for them to for the information that we collect from per regulations.
So they would have to provide supporting documentation, which is that the last bullet point on the other side, right? That shows that they either have National Register or they were licensed in this state or Canadian province. So they don't have to say maybe right here, but they have to provide supporting documentation for any of these 4 options, correct?
Correct, yes, because that would be the basis that they're applying to take the complete on.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We can move now. The last one is verification of experience. And I want to also, since this is the one that we may address the question of supervision agreement, I'd like to first ask Ms. Sorick if she could offer some comments about the SPE form, and then we can use that as some background or basis as we look at this verification of experience form. Ms. Sork?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. Yes, I jogged my memory and I remembered that because I was thinking initially that we had gotten rid of the pre-approval of the plan for us psychological associates, which we did, but this was a separate issue. So one of the problems with the supervision agreement on an administrative level is it has to be signed and dated prior to when the experience occurs. And this has come up as an enforcement issue for trainees. As we were talking about the quality of the supervision in the discussion of pathways, the discussion went to, do we need a supervision agreement if we have a requirement that there is a weekly log, which can be requested by the supervisor or the trainee at any time in the application process? And in addition to that, the verification of experience really captures all the necessary data points. And I think Ms. Chung has a little additional information about this that she discovered, but that was the reason why we focused, instead of the supervision agreement form, on the verification of experience form, because what we're most interested in is after the experience take place, if that person is competent enough to apply for licensure. So that was the policy direction of taking one less requirement, a perceived barrier, out of the process, and yet we're still getting the quality information that we're looking for after the experience takes place. So Ms. Chung, if you had a little bit more to add to that, I just wanted to add that bit of rejogging my memory of that policy issue.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Yes, that's a very good recollection as well, and that's similar to what I have remembered. And I found a little note that we have put down through the discussion at the 2018 meeting that we want to make sure there's some compliance on the VOE form by not creating the issue that Ms. Sorick has just mentioned. And then we have board members' input in making that change as well, I believe. So on this form, we have, if Mr. Gage, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down to the second page, at the closer to the bottom of that. It's right there. So we have asked that that they will only the supervisor acknowledge that they have complied with the conditions and acknowledgements that they have discussed regarding the experience. So this is the language that we came up at that time.
It's on the first page, or the explanatory page, the instructions, it says if I completed the experience in California, I would be signing that I met the requirements with the supervision agreement. But now we're saying we're not going to have a supervision agreement, right? Am I understanding that right?
Yes.
Oh, we're not going to have one.
So the language in the proposed language, the requirement for a supervision agreement is not is not there, but trainee and supervisor, they should have discussed about the experience. We just don't want to make it as a requirement, so that because of the running into the enforcement issue, and we would just want to focus on the quality product that they produce as the end result.
Okay, so we would expect they would have a supervision agreement, but it's not required for to be submitted to the board, correct?
Yes.
That's what this is saying. And then people getting experience outside of California have to complete page 2. So how is that different? I mean, why don't we have people getting the experience in California also doing that page? Because it seems like the information would be important, right?
Sorry for the pause.
That's okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah. I was just trying to understand sort of the logic of not asking those same questions of people who, do we ask them that maybe in the initial application or something? Do we, so that we don't feel like we need to ask them those questions again?
I believe, sorry, I was coughing. I believe that was the requirements for the page 2 requirements, because that was for experience. They were in a different time frame, and there was no requirement of supervision agreement for out-of-state trainee. So that's why we asked those questions, kind of trying to capture that they're in compliance with the supervision requirements set forth in the regulations. So that's why they were asked those questions. But if the committee believes that it's important for us to ask the questions for experience occurred in California, we can certainly make that change.
What do you think, Ms. Nystrom? Do you have any thoughts about that?
My initial reaction is that I would just, I would hope that I understand not requiring it for an enforcement of the evaluation, but I would hope that there is sort of verification of experience, or at least you know, kind of what an applicant should expect from, you know, or a trainee should expect from the supervisor. You know, certainly outlined. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's a piece that to this that could help set a, you know, guidance or boundaries on to ensure proper training is taking place.
Okay.
The expectation of the training, you know, what they should be receiving from the supervisor.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just go back onto page 1. I guess because this page would be changed after the approval of this regulatory packet. I mean, where it says pre-doctoral internship, was this an official placement overseen by APA, APIC, or KPIC? Since that's not a requirement anymore, is that correct? Or that won't be a requirement? But it isn't, right? It's changed. Ms. Chung?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at the screen
Sorry.
on the part.
Yeah. It's just page one, not the instruction page, but the actual page one of the actual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Whoops. It's, no, that, we're on page 2. You got to go back to page 1. There. Wait.
The form itself, Mr. Gage. So you are on the instructions, and the next page is the first page of the form.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so just down a little bit farther, right there, where it says pre-doctoral internship, and was this overseen by? Because we're saying it doesn't have to be overseen by, it could just be something arranged by the school, is that correct?
Yes, so they can check no if that's the case.
Okay,
And then they will explain it on others to the right.
I see. Okay, okay. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any other questions on this form?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, well, I thought we would, let's open the public comment box for the application for the CAPLE and then this verification of experience form. And after that, break for lunch, and then we'll come back and look at making a motion on the language changes and the forms. So, Mr. Moderator, could you please open the public comment box for comments on these 2 forms, the application to take the CAPLE and the verification of experience form?
We are now open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box, which should have appeared in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We will take comments in the order that they are received. When submitting your comment, please remember to submit it to all panelists. First on the list, we have Elizabeth Winkleman. Hold on just a moment. We will send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Winkleman again from CPA. I have 2 comments on the verification of experience form. One is on the instructions page, the first paragraph under trainee. It says that submit the VOE form provided to you by your primary supervisors. And my question is I may be wrong, but isn't the alternative that that would be submitted directly by the supervisor? And if so, can you modify the form to make it clear that that can be submitted either way, either by you or by the primary supervisor?
Ms. Chung, could you respond to that?
Yes, yes, we can make that clarification. Not a problem. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then I just had one other comment, which is, on the actual page 1 of the form, Dr. Harpsheets, you pointed out that it does say the trainee and I complied with all the conditions and acknowledgements set forth in the supervision agreement. So I appreciate the explanation of the reason for removing the supervision agreement, and that would be streamlining things definitely both for the applicants and for the staff. So, but if it is not going to be a requirement, then I don't think it makes sense for the person to then have to check off at the bottom of the form that they complied with all the conditions and acknowledgements set forth, because they may not even have thought about it. They may not have a formal agreement. So if there is no requirement up front, I would strongly urge you to remove that sentence where they have to check off yes or no on the acknowledgement set forth in the supervision agreement from this form.
Okay, thank you. It could be confusing.
Well, it actually could be unfair to applicants if there was no requirement and then at the very end, when they may have put in, an entire year of work, to then have to check no, that they didn't do that. I really think it would be a problem.
Well, yeah, I think when supervision, so somehow maybe that wording could be changed, like agreed upon or something like that with the supervisor or something like
I
that.
think we can actually just delete that line. And I wanted to just quickly add that the other reason for removing the supervision agreement requirement was that it was for California applicants only, which was not seen as an equitable requirement if out-of-state folks did not have to comply with the same requirement. So that was one other layer of removing the supervision agreement requirement.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And just to clarify, this is Evan. Is there a particular sentence you would like me to strike at this time?
Well, we will make a motion about any changes as a committee, and then that would determine what gets struck.
Okay, and before I sign off from my comment, I just want to thank you for the clarifications and withdraw my request that this removal of the supervision agreement be discussed at the board meeting, because my concerns have been addressed at this meeting. Of course, it's still up to your discretion, but as long as it's not on the supervision, the verification of experience form, my concerns have been addressed. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, let's break for lunch. It's 12:46, and take a half hour till 1:15. And when we come back, Ms. Nystrom, you or I will make a motion to address the ideas that have been put forth by us, by Dr. Winkleman, and move forward from there.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's plan on being back at 1:17. Highlighted changes. We are ready for a motion. Ms. Nystrom, would you like to make it, or would you like me to? I made some notes.
I didn't make the comprehensive notes that I think you made. So if you make the motion, I'm happy to do the second.
Okay. Okay, I will get started. And then we will have public comment after the motion is made. So I'd like to make a motion to change the presented draft language of pathways regulation as follows, to be then presented to the board for approval. Number one, to clarify the words real time to include the words audio visual. Number two, where licensee is defined, specify the meaning of the word registrant. Three, eliminate the specifications of general applied psychologist and health service psychologist throughout the regulations. Four, remove the acknowledgement of supervision agreement on the verification of experience form. Five, amend the instructions on the verification of experience form to indicate that the trainee or supervisor can submit the form. And six, delegate the wording changes to board and regulatory staff. Does that cover it, Ms. Nystrom?
I believe it does, and I second that motion.
Okay.
Dr. Harbsheets, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Heather Hergensen, Reg Counsel here. I'm wondering if the subsection E of 1380.3 that's currently on screen for licensee, because Business and Professions Code section 23.7 does state that a licensee includes any permit given by a licensing agency, we might not need that definition at all if we're striking registrant. But what we could do to clarify where needed in the regulations, if we're referring to the psychologist and registrant, we would reference that Business and Professions Code section.
Yeah, that sounds like that would do it.
So the motion would actually be, you could delete section 1380.3 subdivisions E, G, and H.
Would
and
we have to do that every time, Heather? Or Ms. Hoganson? Every time we reference that? I'm just thinking of
I
all
would
of
say
the occasions.
I would say if there was a regulation section where we were using licensee in the broad sense, that would be appropriate to add it as the reference section. And
Oh,
it's a
in the reference
non-substantive.
section. Okay,
Yes.
not to the language, but just to the. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
And I noticed in other parts later on in the regulations, they do refer to general applied psychologists. So part of my motion was to eliminate the specifications of that or health service psychologist wherever they appeared, so it wasn't confusing.
Understood.
So I wouldn't necessarily strike section E, but maybe just use, just clarify registrant as defined in, or however you would say that. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, did you mean striking the word register? Because if you just strike the word or registrant.
I didn't know. I was saying just to clarify what the meaning of the word registrant is, so it's not confusing. Like, I understand that registrant is in business and professions, and it's defined a certain way. And so I think we should leave it in there, just that it's referenced. I don't know. I was going to leave that up to you to how to clarify, so that it's not thought of as, oh, there might be two categories of psychologists in California, a psychologist or a registered psychologist, because then that could be confusing. Or what does that really mean, registrant? I think just for somebody reading those, thinking about the public reading those, would they really know what registrant means?
Dr. Harbsheets, would it make sense to say a licensee means a psychologist or registered psychological associate licensed by the board, comma, pursuant to Business and Professions Code section, and then we put in the general provision there, and then that way we're covered?
Yes, that would take care of it.
Ms. Hoganson, would that help?
I think if I was visually capturing all the words that you just said, I think that would work. Yes, we have been adding the word registered to psychological associate when we're seeing it, and so that would match up. Yes.
Yeah, that would be good. So we have a motion and a second.
So just to help out Mr. Gage here, so pursuant to section, remind me again this section?
23.7.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, we have a motion and a second. Let's open the comment box for public comment.
We are now open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box and send it to all participants. We will be taking comments in the order received, and we have a request for comment from Elizabeth Winkleman. Hold on just a moment, please, and I will submit a request to unmute your microphone. Dr. Winkleman? Oh,
Hi, yes, it's Elizabeth Winkleman again from CPA. I am still concerned, it's going to be up to you, the committee, but I'm still concerned that defining a registrant as a licensee is kind of misleading. They're not licensed. I haven't reviewed that section of the code. I know there's different definitions in different parts of the Business and Professions Code. So as I've said, on a national level and in terms of what psychological assistants think they can and can't do, and in terms of what the public thinks, I think it's important to maintain the distinction between a licensed psychologist and somebody who is supervised and registered as a psychological associate. And I'm hoping you will consider a different way to address this, that at least for purposes of specifically psychology and psychologists, or at least here, not to contribute to that confusion.
Dr. Winkleman, can you say again how it would be confusing to someone reading this? I'm sorry, I didn't quite pick up with this change, this possible change.
this is the moderator. Bear with us just a moment while we get Dr. Winkleman back.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Because you're still defining licensee here as a psychologist or a registered psychological associate. So a registered psychological associate is simply not a licensed psychologist. They're not a licensee. And I understand from what Ms. Hoganson is saying is there may be parts of the Business and Professions Code that define it that way, but I'm sure I'll look at that part of the BPC later. I don't think that's specific to psychologists.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Ms. Hoganson, do you happen to have the wording of section 23.7?
Yes, I do. One second. So license defined, unless otherwise expressly provided. License means license, certificate, registration, or other means to engage in a business or profession regulated by this code or referred to in sections 1000 or 3600. And that's general section 23.7 of the Business and Professions Code.
Dr. Winkleman?
Right, I see that, and actually that is pretty clear. But then I still think that in my experience of talking to applicants, there is some confusion about that, and they are also a trainee. I think it's more accurate to say, at least for psychologists, that the psychological assistant is still a trainee, as in number F. There are some professions where the top of their profession is actually a certificate or a registration. So for example, there might be a registered psychological technician. They're not in training to become a MD radiologist. They are registered or certified or whatever at that level, which is the top of their particular profession. So that is why, since the general provisions sound very clear, and I appreciate what it's saying, I think it may apply differently in different professions, and these people are still trainees.
I see what you're saying, that in F, it suggests that a trainee is somewhat different than a licensee as identified in number E, when in fact they're the same. However, I just thought of something. If I was in an internship that did not require registration, as a psychological assistant, but I'm accruing supervised professional hours. I might be a trainee, but not a registered psychological associate. I'm just thinking that through.
Right, technically, the registered psychological associate would meet the definition of both E and F right now.
Right, right, yes. Ms. Nystrom, do you have any thoughts on that? Could be helpful from a public member stepping away from, being part of that profession and hearing these all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I share, well, I see the perspective that a registered psychological associate isn't licensed. And so, I share that pause. But then I also don't have any suggestions on how to reword it to address the issue.
Yeah. I wonder if this is one that, if the motion passes and it's recommended to the board in this form, Dr. Winkleman, you might bring this same point up when the board has that discussion. And that will give us all some time to think a bit more about it too.
Dr. Harbsheets, is it also something that we could delegate to the board staff to continue to look at, and then when we have our full board meeting, we could look at maybe a couple of different options?
I think that's a great idea. So that would would I amend the motion to say where I said previously where licensee is defined, specify the meaning of the word registrant and provide possible alternatives for clarification. How does that sound?
I think that works for me. I could second that.
Okay. Then we can revisit this, Dr. Winkleman, in more detail at the board meeting when we've had some other options presented to us and some time to think a bit more about it.
Mr. Gage, can you put in a comment box of what the committee just delegated to staff between now and the February meeting?
Dr. Winkleman, did you have further comments?
No, I think that's a great idea and would appreciate the board staff coming up with some options. I hope some options will be considered that do not leave registered psychological associate within the definition of licensee.
Okay, thank you. I see Dr. Linda Crow also has a comment.
We have submitted a request for Dr. Linda Crow to unmute her microphone.
Yes, Joe Linder Crow with CPA. I don't want to harp on this too much, but I do want to back up what Dr. Winkleman is saying. I mean, often in board meetings and in communications, I guess this might be a question for the board. You refer often to your licensees. And every time I hear that term, I think you mean people who are licensed to practice psychology. And I understand it seems like we're caught in the dilemma of trying to tie this back to the exact language used in the B&P code, which, as Elizabeth has pointed out, speaks broadly to a range of professions. Also, I think I heard someone say earlier that it would also be a matter of convenience to be able to use one term to encapsulate those who have a license and those who are registered psychological associates. But I just think in a practical sense, when many people hear the word licensee, they believe that that means a person that has a license. And, you know, right now at the national level, there are so many conversations going on about the master's level and those states that, you know, who has a license. And as Elizabeth pointed out, we recently had to clarify something with the American Psychological Association, because they read the B&P code, they read the language, and they thought that psychological assistants in California were licensed to practice. So I think it really can create a huge amount of confusion. I understand where you're going with this, but I think, you know, sometimes it's helpful just to step back and look at what the practical use of a word is. And I think the term licensee to many people, maybe most people, means someone that has been issued a license. So I would hope that you would really, let's try to come up with a better way of addressing this, because I agree with Dr. Winkleman that this is going to be confusing. It might make sense in regulatory language, but in the real world, I think it's going to create some confusion.
Well, I think too, if you look at D right above E, when you say licensed or licensed psychologist, means a psychologist licensed by the board. So I think then the way we have E could make it even, it could really add to the confusion. How is licensed different than licensee? And so yes, it'll be a good discussion at the board, because definitely we want clarity. So thank you so much for really pushing this issue and forcing us to look at it most carefully. Dr. Winkleman, do you have another comment?
Yes, I wanted to, I wanted to mention something that perhaps others on this call are not aware of. Dr. Harpsheets, I think you are, but perhaps not others, is there is a movement nationally to credential and get master's level, independent master's level psychological professionals. And one of the terms that is being suggested for that is psychological associate. So those would be licensed psychological associates. There may even be some in the rest of the country. So that's why Joe and I, Dr. Linda Crow and I were contacted by APA, because they thought we already had that independent level of master's psychological associate. So just to give a little broader context as to why this is problematic. And yes, if you look at D, E, and F altogether, it really doesn't, it's very confusing. And I did look up the 23.7, and it says unless otherwise expressly provided, and I'm quite sure there's other parts in the Business and Professions Code and in the regulations where, for purposes of a particular profession that may have different levels, it's defined differently. So I don't see that as an obstacle. I don't see 23.7 as an obstacle again. So, but I appreciate that you're going to be looking into this more, and look forward to the various options and discussion at the board meeting.
Yeah, and so just to add for staff that whatever wording that they might propose, that the board consider under section E, that D, E, and F make sense altogether. Maybe Evan, you could add that in the comment, that so that we're sure that there's attention paid to D, E, and F as consistent. Thank you. Okay. See, any other public comment?
Seeing no additional requests for public comment, would you like to close the option?
Yes. Okay. Well, we will take a vote on this motion. So if staff could please call the roll.
Certainly. Harb Sheets,
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. I wrote down the motion. If anybody needs me to send it to them, I can do that. The exact wording of how we did it. Okay. At this point, let us move on unless Ms. Sorick or Ms. Nystrom has anything more to add in this item 6B.
Nothing here. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to number 7, which is recommendations for agenda items for future licensure committee meetings. Mr. Moderator, could you open the public comment box for comments on that agenda item?
Yes, coming right up. We are now open for public comment. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box and send it to all participants. Instructions are on the screen. We are taking comments in the order that they are received. And will you please repeat the number of
item number 7.
Item number 7. Thank you very much. Let us take just a moment to see if we have any requests for public comments on item number 7. Seeing no requests for public comment, would you like to close the feature?
Yes, please. Okay. At this time, the licensure committee will now meet in closed session to discuss and consider qualifications for licensure. And as a reminder, at the end of closed session, we will only reconvene to adjourn the meeting. Thanks to everyone for thoughtful comments, hanging in there with us, and really helping to improve these draft regulations that we will recommend to the board. Thank you very, very much.